What's going on, everybody? Kisabi from ShowZone here, and welcome to another episode of ShowOff. Now, in the past few episodes, I've gone over the different submenus such as the Scale tool and the Expand tool. Next on the docket for the tools that you have in the logo editor is the Skew tool. Now, I don't use the Skew tool that often, but it can be effective for certain things such as making fonts at a tilted or diagonal type of orientation. Take this square that I have, for example. I could make a letter T, plain and simple, and just kind of have it be very straight on. Or with the Skew tool, I could tilt it so it gives it a little bit more flair and pizzazz with a diagonal type of tilt. When you're using this tool, you can either scale using the X or Y axis. If you're moving your analog stick to the right, that will tilt it to the right diagonally, or you can go left to make it go left. But also, if you have a kind of straight on square like this, if you go up or down, it will shift the opposite direction, or the opposite part of the square. So again, I'll demonstrate. If you move it to the left or right, that'll move the left or right sides of the square. You can see the top and the bottom stay perfectly aligned here. And if you move the analog stick up or down, that will move the top and bottom parts of the shape while keeping the left and right sides the same. Now again, if I wanted to make a diagonal shape, the Skew tool is actually most effective for this while keeping the edges as straight as possible. I could make the same shape that you see here with two triangles and a square, but it would take a lot more guesswork and a little bit more effort to do the same thing that the Skew tool actually does. For this reason, it's a lot more time effective and clean to just use the Skew tool as opposed to building something shape by shape. In the last video, we also went over the Expand tool, which is giving something an outline if you wish. The Expand tool actually works really well with the Skew tool. So if I wanted to make that T that I had earlier, well, here you go. Just added that top layer again, along with the bottom layer. Now we have a really cool and basic 4-shape T logo that you could use for a cap or your hat. You can also use this tool to make rounded text letters as well. You don't have to do strictly diagonal. You can kind of use the same techniques to make the rounded text. So as you can see here, I have a pink half dome shape to kind of act as a guide. I'll be deleting that later, but you can have a guide like that to ensure that everything is rounded correctly from left to right. So if I wanted to make a TNT box or crates from like Crash Bandicoot or something, what you can do is use the Skew tool, and using this pink part as a guide, go to the Skew function and just slowly pinch it over until it matches the form or the shape of that pink rounded section. Should definitely mention too, we went over last time the fine versus coarse control button, which on PlayStation is the triangle, and that makes your shape go a little bit slower or faster depending on the one that you have selected. For the Skew tool, I would definitely advise using the slower method. As you can see here, this is using the fine control, and this is using the other control, which if you're not careful can also mess up the other access, the one that you're not trying to do. There's so many times where I do a shape and I'm just trying to scale it and I accidentally select the Skew tool option and it just completely messes up the shape that I'm working with, so I have to like delete that shape and start over. But yeah, again, the difference is like monumental. So this is like the fine control, and this is the same movement on my analog stick using the basic control, the coarse control. Alright, so we have the word TNT, and if I were to make my TNT box, I would just delete this portion now that I don't need it. Let's go with like a red square to form the TNT box. And then if you wanted like a 3-dimensional box, like for the TNT for example, you can use the Skew tool along with a darker shade to kind of add some depth. So as you can see here, I have the same exact square tool behind the TNT box. We're just going to add the Skew tool a little bit here, and then move it over to the side. So there's like the top portion of the box. Then this one here is going to be even darker. There we go. It's a little bit hard to kind of like make sure that you have the same type of angle from side to side, but we just made like a 3D box just using those 3 shapes alone. Then we can also copy these shapes that we have, turn these into black, and then using that Expand tool, make sure that we have an outline if we wanted like an outline for the box. Very rudimentary, and I'd spend more time on this, but for the purpose of this video, just kind of giving a slight like introduction to the Skew tool, let's just add a little plunger, and there you go. There's a very simplistic like TNT box. You can make other similar boxes, but also like the curved shapes like I mentioned. Now we went over the Expand tool and adding like outlines that are very uniform, and it doesn't work the same with all shapes. So the other thing I'll mention with the Skew tool is if you're resizing something using the Scale tool, it doesn't always hold the same angle for the skew that you originally had. So to demonstrate, if I were to resize this box right here and add a outline, you can kind of see like the diagonals at the top and the bottom aren't parallel with the original black box that I have. And this will pop up sometimes if you use the Skew tool quite a bit and are looking to maybe add like a secondary color or outline. You might run into this a little bit, so just be sure that you go over to the Skew tool and use the fine and coarse controls to kind of readjust it a little bit if necessary. Down here in the corner where it says Skew X and Skew Y, those each go up to 2.00 in terms of how far you can skew them. So for example, here's the maximum you can go on the Y axis, and then the X-axis would act similarly. As far as cycling through all of these boxes, over on the left you have like the scale, skew, expand, and so forth. The Skew tool is probably the one I use the least. There aren't too many applications where you'll have to use this in the logo editor the more you start working on logos, but it is an effective tool in certain situations, and I hope I've highlighted a few of the better ones in this video, the ones that you'll maybe be using more often than not. But that'll do it for today's episode of Show Off. I hope you learned something new with the logo editor, and as always, if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know in the comments section. I'd be happy to help or answer any other questions that you have. Signing off for now, this is Kasabi from ShowZone.